The wind howled like a banshee across the Montana plains, and Clara Whitmore knew she was going to die. Her wagon lay overturned in the ditch, its wheels splintered beyond repair, and the storm that had been threatening all day finally unleashed its fury. Snow fell in thick, merciless sheets, erasing the world around her until she could barely see her own hands. The temperature plummeted with each passing hour, and her thin coat, adequate for the mild autumn weather when she'd started her journey, afforded little protection against winter's sudden, vicious assault. Clara pulled her dead husband's letter from her coat pocket, the paper now soft and worn from countless readings. My dearest Clara, if anything happens to me, go to my brother Samuel in Bitter Creek. He'll take care of you. James had written those words just before riding off to help fight the range war that eventually claimed his life. That was 8 months ago, and Clara had finally found the courage to leave their small homestead and seek out this mysterious brother-in-law she'd never met. Now, as she pressed her back against the overturned wagon for shelter, she wondered if she'd ever see another sunrise. The cold bit through her bones, and drowsiness began to creep in, the dangerous kind that meant her body was shutting down. She'd heard stories of travelers found frozen in the spring thaw, peaceful expressions on their faces, as if they'd simply fallen asleep. Maybe that wouldn't be so terrible, she thought, her eyelids growing heavy. Maybe I'll see James again. But just as she was about to surrender to the cold's embrace, she heard something that made her heart skip, the sound of hoofbeats. Cutting through the storm, a rider was approaching, moving fast despite the blizzard's fury. Clara tried to call out, but her voice was lost in the wind. The horse and rider emerged from the white curtain like phantoms, and Clara saw a man dismounting, his movements quick and purposeful. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Without hesitation, he began examining her overturned wagon, then turned his attention to her. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" His voice was deep and steady, cutting through the storm's chaos. Clara tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering too violently. The stranger didn't wait for an answer. He knelt beside her, his gloved hands checking for injuries with practiced efficiency. "We need to get you warm, and fast," he said, his breath visible in the frigid air. "There's a line shack about a quarter-mile from here, but I don't think you can make it on foot in this storm." Without another word, he scooped her into his arms, as if she weighed nothing. Clara wanted to protest. She was a proper widow, and this man was a complete stranger, but the warmth emanating from his body was too precious to resist. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay that stood steady despite the howling wind. "Hold tight," he murmured against her ear as he lifted her onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, and Clara felt safer than she had in months. As they rode through the blizzard toward shelter, Clara caught glimpses of her rescuer's face in the pale light. Strong jaw, kind eyes, and a weathered complexion that spoke of years spent working the land. There was something familiar about him, something that tugged at her memory, but her mind was too foggy from the cold to place it. The line shack appeared through the snow like a beacon of hope, a small, rough cabin that promised warmth and survival. But as her rescuer carried her inside, Clara realized that this storm might have brought her more than just salvation from the cold. It might have brought her a second chance at something she thought she'd lost forever. The line shack was sparse, but solid, built to withstand the harsh Montana winters. Samuel, for that's what he'd told her his name was, worked quickly to get a fire started in the stone hearth, while Clara huddled on the single wooden bunk, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Here," he said, wrapping a heavy wool blanket around her shoulders. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes, or you'll catch pneumonia." Clara's eyes widened. I can't. "Ma'am, I understand your modesty, but hypothermia kills faster than propriety saves." His voice was gentle but firm. "I'll turn my back, but you need to change into something dry. There's spare clothes in that chest." With trembling fingers, Clara managed to shed her sodden dress and petticoats, replacing them with a man's flannel shirt and wool trousers that were comically large on her small frame. The dry fabric felt like heaven against her skin. "Better?" Samuel asked, still facing away. "Yes," she whispered, her teeth finally beginning to stop chattering. He turned back to her, and in the firelight, she got her first real look at her rescuer. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair touched by early silver at the temples, and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was a kindness in his face that reminded her of someone, though she still couldn't place who. "What's your name?" he asked, settling into the room's only chair. Clara Whitmore." Something shifted in his expression: surprise, recognition, and something else she couldn't identify. Whitmore. As in James Whitmore. Her heart clenched at the mention of her husband's name. Yes, he was my husband. He had died 8 months ago. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I knew James. Good man. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Clara pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I was traveling to Bitter Creek to find his brother, Samuel Whitmore. James said he'd take care of me if anything happened. The silence that followed was so profound that Clara could hear the storm raging outside, the wind rattling the cabin's windows. When Samuel finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Clara, I am Samuel Whitmore. James was my brother. The words hit her like a physical blow. This man, this stranger who'd saved her life, was her brother-in-law. The family she'd been searching for, the hope she'd been clinging to, was sitting 3 feet away from her. But you don't look anything like James, she stammered. Samuel's smile was sad. Different mothers, same father, though James always took after my fair hair, blue eyes, slender build. I favor our father's side. Dark and stubborn as an old bull. Clara studied his face again, and now she could see it, the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. It was subtle, but it was there. James wrote to me about you, Samuel continued. Said he'd married the prettiest schoolteacher in 3 counties. Said you were brave and smart and had a laugh that could light up a room. His eyes met hers. He loved you something fierce. Clara, his letters were full of you. Tears began to fall down Clara's cheeks. I didn't know he had a brother. He never. James and I had a falling out years ago. Pride and stubbornness on both sides. By the time I heard about his death, the funeral was long over. Samuel's voice was thick with regret. I should have made peace with him while I had the chance. What was the argument about? Samuel was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, our father left the ranch to both of us, but James wanted to sell his half and start fresh somewhere else. I wanted to keep it in the family. We said things, harsh things that brothers should never say to each other, and now I'd give anything to have him back, ranch or no ranch. Samuel stood and added another log to the fire. But I can't change the past. All I can do is honor his memory by taking care of his widow, like he asked. Clara watched him tend the fire, noting the way his shoulders carried the weight of old grief. You blame yourself for his death. If we hadn't fought, maybe he wouldn't have left. Maybe he'd still be alive. James died fighting for what he believed in. That's the kind of man he was. Clara's voice was soft but certain. You couldn't have changed that, Samuel. Some people are born to fight for others, no matter the cost. Samuel turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw the same pain she'd been carrying for 8 months. They were both survivors, both wounded by loss, both trying to find their way forward, in a world that seemed determined to break them. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small cabin, 2 broken souls had found each other in the darkness. Clara didn't know what the morning would bring, but for the first time since James's death, she felt like she might not be facing it alone. Clara woke to the sound of Samuel moving quietly around the cabin. Dawn light filtered through the small window, revealing that the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world transformed by pristine white snow. She'd slept deeply for the first time in months, wrapped in the warmth of the wool blankets and the security of knowing she wasn't alone. Morning, Samuel said softly, not wanting to startle her. Coffee's ready. She accepted the steaming cup gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Thank you for everything. No need to thank me. Family takes care of family. He paused, studying her face in the morning light. You look like you haven't been sleeping well. Clara nearly laughed at the understatement. I haven't slept through the night since James died. Every shadow, every sound. I kept thinking someone was coming for me. The men who killed James. She nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. They came to the homestead twice after the funeral, said James owed them money, said I had to pay his debts or they'd take the land. I gave them everything I had, but they kept coming back. Samuel's jaw tightened. The Hendricks gang. They've been terrorizing small ranchers and homesteaders for months, using the range war as cover for their crimes. His voice carried a dangerous edge. They killed James because he stood up to them, tried to organize the other settlers. You know about them. I've been tracking them for months. They hit my place twice, but I had enough men to drive them off. Smaller operations like yours, ... Double quotes, he shook his head. They're cowards who prey on the helpless. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. They're still out there. Not for long. Samuel's voice was grim. The territorial marshal is finally taking action. There's a bounty on their heads now. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher and set the snow-covered landscape sparkling like diamonds. Clara found herself studying Samuel's profile, noting the way the morning light caught the silver in his hair, the laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of better times. What was James like as a boy? She asked suddenly. Samuel's expression softened. Fearless, always getting into trouble, and somehow always managing to charm his way out of it. He once convinced our schoolteacher that he'd been struck by lightning, and that's why his hair was standing up, when really, he'd been experimenting with one of our father's electrical gadgets. Clara laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. That sounds like James. He once told me he'd been a perfect angel as a child. Perfect angel, Samuel chuckled. He broke his arm falling out of the church bell tower when he was 8. Said he was trying to get closer to heaven to put in a good word with God about our sick calf. Did it work? The calf recovered. James was convinced it was divine intervention. Samuel's smile faded slightly. He always believed things would work out for the best. Even when we fought, he kept writing to me. I was too proud to answer. Clara reached across the small table and touched his hand. He wouldn't want you to carry that guilt. Samuel. James had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. He forgave easily and loved deeply. Samuel looked down at their joined hands, and Clara felt a jolt of awareness run through her. His hands were strong and calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. When he looked up at her, something had shifted in his expression. Clara, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Of course. Are you only here because James told you to come? Because you have nowhere else to go? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? I mean, if you had choices, if you could go anywhere, be anything, would you still be here? Clara considered his question carefully. When James died, I thought my life was over. I was 23 years old, and I felt like I'd already lived my whole story. But sitting here, talking with you about him, laughing about his adventures, she paused, searching for the right words. I feel like maybe there are still chapters to be written. Samuel's eyes searched her face. Even if those chapters are different from what you planned, especially then. Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. I've learned that life rarely follows our plans, but sometimes the detours lead to places we never knew we wanted to go. They sat in the growing warmth of the cabin, the silence between them charged with possibility. Clara knew that something fundamental had shifted between them during the long, cold night. The stranger who'd saved her life had become something more, a connection to her past, a bridge to her future, and perhaps, if she was brave enough to admit it, a chance at healing the broken parts of her heart. Outside, the world was pristine and new, waiting for them to step into it together. For the first time since James's death, Clara felt ready to take that step by noon. The sun had transformed the winter landscape into something magical. Samuel had ventured out to check on Clara's overturned wagon, and returned with news that made her heart sink. The wagon's a total loss, he said, stamping snow off his boots. But I managed to salvage most of your belongings. Clara looked at the small pile of possessions he'd rescued: a few dresses, her mother's Bible, James's letters, and the cameo brooch that had been her grandmother's. Everything that remained of her old life fit in a single flour sack. I don't have much, she said quietly. You have more than you know. Samuel's voice was gentle. You have strength, intelligence, and a heart that hasn't been broken by loss. That's more valuable than any material possession. Clara looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. How can you say that? You barely know me. I know you've survived 8 months alone after losing the man you loved. I know you had the courage to leave everything familiar and strike out for unknown territory to find family you'd never met. I know you didn't break down or give up when that wagon overturned in the storm. Samuel sat across from her, his expression earnest. Those aren't the actions of a weak woman. Clara. She felt tears threatening again. I don't feel strong. Most days, I feel like I'm barely holding myself together. That's what real strength looks like sometimes. It's not about never falling down. It's about getting back up every time you do. They spent the afternoon making plans. Samuel's ranch was a half-day ride from the line shack, assuming the weather held. Clara would stay there until she decided what you wanted to do next. You don't have to decide anything right now, Samuel assured her as they prepared to leave. Take time to grieve, to heal, to figure out what kind of life you want to build. And if I can't pay my way, Samuel's expression hardened. Clara, you're my brother's widow, your family. The idea of you paying your way is insulting. I won't be a burden. You won't be. There's plenty of work on a ranch, and I suspect you're more capable than you give yourself credit for." His voice softened. "Besides, I could use the company. It gets lonely out there." As they rode toward the ranch, Clara found herself stealing glances at Samuel. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle, but there was a gentleness to him that reminded her of James, though in a completely different way. Where James had been quick to laugh and slow to anger, Samuel seemed more measured, more thoughtful. There was a depth to him that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, as they crested a hill. Samuel's face lit up. "It's beautiful country. Rolling hills, good water, grass that grows thick and green in the summer. We run cattle and horses, and I've got a small herd of sheep that the neighboring ranchers think makes me crazy." "Why sheep?" "They're smart, hardy, and the wool brings good money. Plus, they're excellent judges of character. If the sheep don't like someone, I don't trust them." Clara smiled. "What's your test for people the sheep do like?" "I haven't figured that out yet. You'll be the first." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses' hooves crunching through the snow. Clara found herself relaxing for the first time in months, feeling safe and protected in Samuel's presence. "Samuel," she said suddenly, "why didn't you ever marry?" He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I was engaged once. Sarah Mitchell. Beautiful girl. Sweet as sugar, and practical as a pocket watch. What happened? She died of fever the winter before we were supposed to be married. After that, I threw myself into building the ranch. Told myself I didn't need anyone else." He glanced at her. "I was wrong, of course. A man needs more than work to make life meaningful. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. I made my peace with it." Samuel's voice was thoughtful. "But lately, I've been thinking that maybe it's time to open my heart again. Maybe isolation isn't the answer to grief." Clara felt something flutter in her chest at his words. "What changed your mind?" Samuel's eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. "I think you know." As they rode toward the ranch, Clara realized that the blizzard had done more than just bring them together. It had opened a door she hadn't even known existed. Behind that door lay possibilities she'd never imagined. A future she'd never dared to hope for. The sun was beginning to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, smoke rose from a chimney, marking the location of Samuel's ranch, Clara's new home, at least for now. As they approached the cluster of buildings that made up the ranch, Clara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the life she'd planned, but maybe it was the life she was meant to have. Maybe sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our stories are the ones we never saw coming. The Whitmore Ranch was larger than Clara had expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings and corrals that spoke of a prosperous operation. As they approached, she could see cattle in the distant fields and horses in the nearest paddock. It was a working ranch, alive with purpose and possibility. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed, taking in the sight of the weathered buildings nestled against the rolling hills. "Wait until you see it in spring," Samuel said with pride. "The whole valley turns green, and the wildflowers bloom for miles." A man emerged from the barn as they rode up, tall, lean, with graying hair and a weathered face. He approached with the easy stride of someone comfortable in his own skin. "Boss," he called out, relief evident in his voice. "We were getting worried when the storm hit, and you didn't come back." "Tom, this is Clara Whitmore, James's widow," Samuel said as he dismounted. "Clara, this is Tom Harrison, my foreman and the man who actually keeps this place running." Tom touched his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for your loss. James was a good man." "Thank you," Clara said, accepting Samuel's help as she dismounted. Her legs were shaky from the long ride, and she was grateful for his steadying hand. "Mrs. Whitmore will be staying with us," Samuel told Tom. "Can you have Maria prepare the guest room?" "Already done, boss. Maria had a feeling you'd be bringing someone home." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Maria, my housekeeper," Samuel explained. "She's been with me for 10 years, and she has an uncanny ability to know things before they happen. Fair warning, she'll probably have you married off to someone within the week." Before Clara could respond, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was small and round, with kind eyes, and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face broke into a wide smile when she saw Clara. "Dios mío!" she exclaimed, hurrying over to them. "You must be the Signora. I am Maria, and I have been waiting for you." Waiting for me? Clara asked, confused. Si, primera vez met of you 3 nights ago. A woman with sad eyes and a broken heart, coming to us in the snow. Maria took Clara's hands in hers, studying her face. But also a woman with much love still to give. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Maria, come. Maria interrupted, leading Clara toward the house. You are cold and tired. I have soup warming, and your room is ready. As they walked toward the house, Clara heard Samuel chuckling behind them. I warned you, he said. Thought the interior of the house was warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture, and the smell of something delicious coming from the kitchen. Maria led Clara to a room on the second floor, a bright, airy space with a large window overlooking the valley. This was to be the master bedroom, Maria explained as she bustled around, checking that everything was in order. But Senor Samuel, he says it has too much light, too much happiness. He prefers the dark room at the back of the house. Maria. Samuel's voice carried a warning note as he appeared in the doorway with Clara's belongings. What? I only speak the truth. Maria's eyes twinkled with mischief. A man who chooses darkness when he could have light is a man who has forgotten how to hope. Clara found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. Maria, this room is beautiful. Thank you. De nada, Mia. Now, you rest. Tomorrow we talk, and I tell you all about this stubborn man who saved you. After Maria left, Samuel lingered in the doorway, his expression uncertain. Are you comfortable? Do you need anything? Just rest, Clara said softly. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. He nodded and turned to go, but Clara's voice stopped him. Samuel, yes. I'm glad the storm brought us together. Something passed across his face, hope perhaps, or recognition of something that had been building between them since that first moment in the blizzard. So am I, Clara, so am I. That night, Clara lay in the comfortable bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. Samuel had offered her sanctuary without question, treated her with respect and kindness, and made her feel like she belonged somewhere again. She thought about the man sleeping in the room at the back of the house, the one who chose darkness over light. Maria was right. Samuel had forgotten how to hope. But Clara had seen glimpses of something else in his eyes, something that made her own heart skip a beat. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to bring light back into Samuel's life, just as he had brought warmth back into hers. It was a dangerous thought, a betrayal of the grief she'd carried for James. But it was also a possibility that made her feel alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about what kind of future she wanted to build. But tonight, for the first time in 8 months, Clara Whitmore slept peacefully, dreaming not of the past, but of the future. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the large window, illuminating a world transformed by the previous day's snow. She dressed quickly in one of her salvage dresses and made her way downstairs. Following the sounds of quiet conversation, she found Samuel and Maria in the kitchen, their heads bent over what appeared to be account books. They looked up as she entered, and Samuel immediately stood. Good morning, he said, his eyes warm. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in months, Clara admitted. Thank you again for the room. It's lovely. Breakfast is ready, Maria announced, bustling around the kitchen. Sit. You are too thin, Mia. We must fix this. As they ate, Clara learned more about the ranch's operations. Samuel ran nearly 1,000 head of cattle, along with his controversial sheep and a small herd of horses. He employed 6 men year-round, with additional help during roundup and branding season. What about the books? Clara asked, nodding toward the ledgers. I couldn't help but notice you were working on accounts. Samuel's expression grew slightly embarrassed. I'm afraid I'm better with cattle than with numbers. I can usually make sense of it, but it takes me longer than it should. I taught school for 4 years before I married James, Clara said. I had to keep all the records for the school board, track supplies, manage the budget. If you'd like, I could help. I don't want you to feel obligated. I want to help. Clara interrupted. I need to feel useful, to contribute something. Samuel studied her face, then nodded. All right, but only if you're sure. After breakfast, Samuel gave Clara a tour of the ranch. They walked through the barns, where she met the horses and marveled at the organization of the operation. Everything was clean, well-maintained, and efficient. You've built something impressive here, she said as they stood in the doorway of the main barn. watching the hands go about their morning chores. It's taken 15 years, Samuel replied. Some days I wondered if it was worth it, working alone, building something with no one to share it with. Clara glanced at him, hearing the loneliness in his voice. And now I'm beginning to remember why I started in the first place. A man needs something to build toward, something to leave behind. They walked toward the house in comfortable silence, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. Clara found herself studying Samuel's profile, noting the way he moved with quiet confidence, how he spoke to his men with respect and kindness. He was nothing like James, yet there was something about him that made her feel safe and cherished. "Samuel," she said suddenly, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about what your life might have been like if you and James hadn't fought? If you'd stayed close?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Every day since I heard he died, I think about the letters I never answered, the visits I never made, the nephew or niece I might have had if he'd lived." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "But I also think about the fact that if things had been different, you might never have needed to come here. And that would have been a tragedy." Clara felt her heart skip a beat. "Samuel, ... I know. It's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still grieving, still healing, but I want you to know that having you here, seeing you laugh at breakfast, watching you take interest in the ranchets, awakened something in me that I thought was dead." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you, Clara, more than I should, more than I expected. And I hope that maybe you feel something too." Clara's breath caught. She did feel something, a warmth, a connection, a sense of possibility that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But the guilt was there too, the feeling that caring for Samuel was somehow betraying James's memory. "I do feel something," she admitted quietly, "but I'm scared. I loved James so much, and I feel like I'm betraying him by even considering ... James loved you enough to send you to me," Samuel said gently. "He wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone, mourning him. He'd want you to be happy, to love again, to build a new life." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I knew my brother. He was generous with his love, never selfish. And because if I were the one who died, I'd want the same thing for you." Clara felt tears threatening. "This is all happening so fast. Yesterday I was a widow with nowhere to go, and now you're a woman with choices," Samuel finished. "And I want you to know that whatever you choose, you'll always have a place here. As family, as a friend, as whatever you need me to be." Clara reached out and took his hand, marveling at how right it felt. "Can we take this slowly? Can we see where it leads without putting pressure on ourselves?" Samuel lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "We have all the time in the world, Clara. There's no rush." As they walked back toward the house, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. The tight knot of grief that had lived there for 8 months was beginning to loosen, making room for something new. She wasn't ready to call it love, not yet, but it was hope. And that was enough for now. 2 weeks passed in a pleasant routine. Clara threw herself into helping with the ranch's bookkeeping, discovering that Samuel's financial records were in far worse shape than he'd admitted. She spent hours each day organizing receipts, updating ledgers, and creating systems that would make future record keeping easier. "You've accomplished more in 2 weeks than I managed in 2 years, Samuel said one evening as they worked together in his study. "I had no idea things were so disorganized." "It's not disorganized," Clara said diplomatically. "It's just ... creative." Samuel laughed, and Clara felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd grown closer, sharing meals, stories, and quiet moments that felt charged with possibility. But they'd also been careful, respectful of Clara's need to process her grief and adjust to her new life. "Clara," Samuel said suddenly, his voice growing serious, "there's something I need to tell you." Before he could continue, the sound of horses approaching at high speed interrupted them. Samuel was on his feet instantly, his expression grim. "That's trouble," he said, moving toward the window. "Riders coming fast at this hour usually means bad news." Tom Harrison burst through the front door without knocking, his face pale with urgency. "Boss, we've got company. The Hendricks gang there headed this way, maybe 20 minutes out." Clara's blood ran cold. The men who'd killed James, who'd terrorized her for months, were coming here. "How many?" Samuel asked, already moving toward the gun cabinet. 8, maybe 10. "They're armed and they look like they mean business." Samuel began distributing weapons to his men, his movements efficient and controlled. "Tom, get the women to the root cellar. Postguards at the barn and the bunkhouse. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. No, Clara said quietly, but her voice carried clearly across the room. This is about me. They're here because of me. Samuel turned to her, his expression fierce. They're here because they're criminals who prey on innocent people. This isn't your fault, Clara. But it is my fight, she said, moving to stand beside him. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid. If we're going to face them, we face them together. Absolutely not. I won't have you in danger. Samuel, I've been in danger since the day James died. At least here, I'm not alone. Before Samuel could argue further, Maria appeared in the doorway, her face set with determination. Señor Samuel. The señora. He's right. We cannot keep running from evil. Men, sometimes we must stand and fight. Maria, you need to get to the cellar. I have been through 3 range wars, 2 Indian raids, and a tornado that took the roof off the barn. Maria interrupted. I am not hiding in the cellar, while bandits threaten my family. Samuel looked around the room at the determined faces of his people, his family. Really, and Clara saw the moment he realized that this fight was bigger than just protecting her. It was about protecting everything they'd built together. All right, he said finally. But we do this smart. Tom, position the men where they can cover the approaches. Maria, you and Clara stay in the house, away from the windows. If things go bad, you get to the cellar and stay there until it's over. The next 20 minutes passed in tense preparation. Samuel's men took positions around the ranch buildings, and Clara found herself checking and rechecking the rifle Samuel had given her. She'd learned to shoot as a girl, but she'd never aimed at another human being. I hope I don't have to use this, she said, running her hands along the smooth stock. You won't, Samuel said firmly. We'll handle this. And if you can't? Samuel's eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there. He wasn't sure they could handle 10 armed men, but he was going to try. Then we'll face whatever comes together. The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder, and Clara felt her heart pounding against her ribs. Samuel moved to the window, peering through the curtains. They're here, he said quietly. Clara joined him at the window, and her breath caught when she saw the riders approaching. Even in the fading light, she recognized Jake Hendricks, the leader of the gang that had terrorized her for months. He was a large man with a cruel face and cold eyes, flanked by his brothers and their associates. Clara Whitmore. Jake's voice boomed across the yard. We know you're in there. Come out, and we'll make this easy on everyone. Samuel stepped onto the porch, his rifle held casually, but ready. This is private property. Hendricks, you're not welcome here. Well, Jake laughed, his voice carrying an ugly note. Samuel Whitmore. Heard you were harboring fugitives now. The only fugitives I see are the ones on horseback, Samuel replied evenly. Mrs. Whitmore is under my protection. Your protection, Jake spat. Your brother thought he could protect her too. Look how that turned out. Clara saw Samuel's jaw tighten, but his voice remained steady. You have 30 seconds to get off my land before we start shooting. Now, that's not very neighborly, Jake said, dismounting from his horse. See, the widow owes us money. Her husband borrowed from us, and now she's got to pay up. James never borrowed money from scum like you, Clara called out, stepping onto the porch beside Samuel. Jake's eyes lit up when he saw her. There's the little widow, still pretty as a picture. Maybe we can work out a different kind of payment arrangement. Samuel's rifle came up instantly. That's far enough, Hendricks. Easy, rancher, I'm just talking business. Jake's hand moved toward his gun. Though I have to say, you're making this harder than it needs to be. The only business here is you leaving, Samuel said. Now, Jake's expression turned ugly. You know what? I'm tired of talking. Boys, I think it's time we collected what we're owed. The world exploded into chaos. Jake drew his gun, and Samuel fired, sending the outlaw diving for cover behind a water trough. The other gang members scattered, seeking shelter behind barn walls and fence posts, their guns blazing. Clara dropped to her knees on the porch, her rifle ready, as bullets splintered the wood around them. She could hear Samuel's men returning fire from their positions, and saw muzzle flashes lighting up the growing darkness. Stay down, Samuel shouted, working the lever on his rifle. A gang member broke cover, running toward the house, and Clara didn't hesitate. She raised her rifle and fired, the shot taking him in the shoulder and spinning him around. He dropped his gun and stumbled away, clutching his wounded arm. Good shot, Samuel said grimly, then cursed as a bullet shattered the window above their heads. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Clara saw Tom Harrison emerge from the barn, his shotgun booming as he drove two of the outlaws back toward their horses. Maria appeared at an upstairs window, her old rifle cracking steadily as she provided covering fire. But the gang was persistent and vicious. They'd set fire to the hay barn, and flames were beginning to spread. Clara realized with growing horror that they might actually lose not just the fight, but everything Samuel had built. "We need to get to the barn," Samuel said, reloading his rifle. "If that fire spreads to the main barn, we'll lose half the horses." "It's too dangerous," Clara protested. "They'll cut you down before you get halfway there. If we don't try, we lose everything anyway." Clara made a decision that would have terrified her a month ago. "Then we go together. 2 rifles are better than 1. Samuel started to protest, but Clara was already moving, running in a crouch toward the barn. She heard him curse behind her, then his boots on the wooden porch as he followed. They made it to the barn just as Jake Hendricks stepped out of the shadows, his gun aimed directly at Clara's heart. "End of the line, widow," he snarled. Samuel's rifle swung toward Jake, but he was too slow. Clara saw the outlaw's finger tighten on the trigger and knew she was about to die. The shot rang out, echoing across the ranch yard. But it was Jake who stumbled backward, a look of surprise on his face as blood spread across his chest. He toppled to the ground, his gun clattering away. Clara turned to see Maria standing in the barn doorway, her old rifle smoking in her hands. "Nobody threatens my family," the older woman said calmly, as if she'd just commented on the weather. The remaining gang members, seeing their leader fall, lost their nerve. They mounted their horses and fled into the night, leaving behind 2 dead and 1 wounded. The threat that had haunted Clara for months was finally over. As the smoke cleared and the adrenaline faded, Clara found herself in Samuel's arms, both of them shaken from the intensity of what they'd just survived. "It's over," he whispered against her hair. "It's finally over." Clara pulled back to look at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "Samuel, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving, but I can't keep it inside anymore. I love you, Clara." Looking into his eyes, Clara realized that the fight had burned away the last of her hesitation. Life was precious and uncertain, and love when it came was a gift, not to be wasted. "I love you too," she whispered, and kissed him there in the smoky darkness, surrounded by the evidence of their victory and the promise of their future together. The weeks following the showdown with the Hendricks gang brought a sense of peace to the ranch that Clara had never experienced. The territorial marshal had arrived to investigate the incident, and after hearing testimony from Clara, Samuel, and the ranch hands, he declared the shootings justified. The bounty on Jake Hendricks and his gang would be paid out to Samuel and his men. But more than the money, it was the feeling of safety that transformed the ranch. For the first time in months, Clara could sleep without starting at every sound. She could walk outside without looking over her shoulder. She could plan for a future that extended beyond mere survival. "You're smiling," Samuel observed one morning, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of golden rose. "I am," Clara said, realizing it was true. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly happy." Samuel reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "I've been thinking about what you said, about taking things slowly." Clara's heart skipped. "And I think we've been through enough together to know what we want. If you're ready, I'd like to ask you properly." Before Clara could respond, Samuel stood and walked to the porch railing. When he turned back to her, he was holding a small velvet box. "Clara Whitmore," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I know this isn't how either of us expected our lives to unfold. I know you loved my brother, and I know you're still carrying that love in your heart. But I also know that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies." Clara felt tears beginning to well in her eyes. "I'm not asking you to forget James, or to love me the way you loved him," Samuel continued. "I'm asking you to love me as I am, to build a new kind of love with me, one that honors the past while embracing the future." He knelt on one knee, opening the box to reveal a beautiful ring, not a diamond, but a sapphire surrounded by small pearls. "This was my mother's ring. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman who would help me become the man I was meant to be." His eyes met hers. "That woman is you, Clara. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, then at Samuel's face, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope, the deep love that had grown between them through hardship and shared purpose. She thought of James, and instead of guilt, she felt something she hadn't expected: approval as if he were giving her his blessing to love again. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Samuel, I'll marry you." The ring fit perfectly, and as Samuel slipped it onto her finger, Clara felt a sense of rightness that went deeper than mere happiness. This was where she belonged, with this man, who had saved her from more than just a blizzard. "There's something else," Samuel said, rising to his feet. "I've been thinking about what you said about James, about how he died fighting for others. I want to honor that." "What do you mean?" "I want to use the bounty money to establish a fund for widows and orphans in the territory. Women like you, who've lost everything and need a new start. We could call it the James Whitmore Memorial Fund." Clara's breath caught Samuel. "That's beautiful. But it's a lot of money. Money we earned by standing up to bullies and protecting what we love. I can't think of a better use for it." Samuel's voice was firm. "Besides, this ranch is profitable enough to support us. We don't need blood money to be happy." Clara stood and wrapped her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by the depth of his compassion. James would have loved this idea. He always said that the best way to honor the dead was to help the living. "Then we'll do it together," Samuel said, holding her close. "Everything we do from now on, we'll do together." They were interrupted by Maria's voice calling from the kitchen. "Sinner, Samuel, Signora, Clara, come quickly." They found Maria in the kitchen, beaming with excitement as she pointed out the window. In the distance, a wagon was approaching, filled with what looked like furniture and household goods. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Signora Patterson from town," Maria explained. "She brings wedding gifts." Clara and Samuel exchanged glances. "Wedding gifts?" Clara asked. "See, the whole town. They know you will marry. They are very excited. Signora Patterson, she organizes everything. The gifts, the food, the music for the celebration." Samuel chuckled. "I guess word travels fast in small towns." "Did you want a big wedding?" Clara asked, suddenly worried. "I assumed we'd have something small. Just family." "Clara," Samuel interrupted gently. "Look around you. Tom, Maria, the ranch hands. The people in town who are bringing gifts, they are family. If they want to celebrate with us, I say let them." As the wagon drew closer, Clara could see that Mrs. Patterson wasn't alone. Several other wagons followed, filled with people from town, all of them smiling and waving. The entire community was coming to celebrate their engagement. "They don't even know me," Clara said, overwhelmed. "They know you're the woman who made Samuel Whitmore smile again," Maria said simply. "That is enough." The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations, gifts, and planning. The town had indeed organized a wedding celebration, complete with musicians, food, and decorations. Clara found herself swept up in the excitement, amazed by the warmth and generosity of these people, who had welcomed her as one of their own. As the evening fell and the last of the visitors departed, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch again, the sapphire ring glinting in the lamplight. "Overwhelmed?" Samuel asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "In the best possible way," Clara replied. 6 months ago, I was completely alone in the world. Now I have a family, a community, a future I never imagined possible. And a man who loves you more than life itself," Samuel added softly. Clara turned to face him, seeing the truth of his words in his eyes. "I love you too, Samuel, not as a replacement for James, but as something entirely new and wonderful." As they sat together in the peaceful evening, Clara marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A blizzard that could have meant death had instead brought life. A tragedy that could have destroyed her had instead led to a new beginning. Sometimes, she realized, the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the most difficult passages. Wedding was set for the following month, giving them time to prepare properly. But Clara already felt married in her heart, bound to Samuel by something deeper than ceremony or law. They had chosen each other, tested by fire and proven by adversity. As the stars came out over the Montana sky, Clara leaned against Samuel's shoulder and allowed herself to believe in happy endings after all. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with autumn painting the Montana landscape in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Clara stood at the window of her room soon to be their room watching the early preparations below. The entire community had transformed the ranch into something magical, with flowers and ribbons decorating every surface, tables set up in the yard, and the smell of Maria's cooking filling the air. "Mia," Maria called from the doorway. "It is time to get ready." Clara turned from the window, her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "I can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Maria said firmly. Carrying Clara's wedding dress, a beautiful ivory gown that had belonged to Samuel's mother, altered to fit Clara perfectly. "You are going to marry the best man in Montana, and the whole territory is here to celebrate." As Maria helped her into the dress, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Less than 2 months ago, she had been a frightened widow with nowhere to go. Now she was about to marry a man who had shown her that love could bloom again, even in the most unlikely circumstances. "Maria," Clara said quietly, "what if I'm not ready? What if I'm still too broken to be a good wife?" Maria's hands stilled on the buttons. "Mia, look at me." Clara turned to face the older woman, seeing wisdom and compassion in her kind eyes. "Love is not about being perfect," Maria said. "Love is about being willing to grow together, to heal together, to face whatever comes together. You and Senor Samuel, you have already proven you can do this." "But James would want you to be happy," Maria interrupted gently. "The dead do not ask us to stop living. They ask us to live well, to love deeply, to honor their memory by embracing the gift of life." Clara felt tears threatening, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sorrow. "Thank you, Maria, for everything." "De nada. Mia, now, let us finish getting you ready. Your husband is waiting." Downstairs, Samuel stood in the main room, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. He wore a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and made his storm gray eyes look even more striking. Tom Harrison stood beside him, serving as his best man. "Nervous?" Tom asked with a grin. "Terrified," Samuel admitted. "What if she changes her mind? What if she realizes she's too good for a rough rancher like me?" "Boss," Tom said seriously, "that woman faced down the Hendricks gang standing beside you. She's not going anywhere." Before Samuel could respond, the minister, a kindly man named Pastor Williams, who had ridden out from town, approached them. "Gentlemen, are we ready to begin?" Samuel nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "As ready as I'll ever be." The guests had gathered in the main room and spilled out onto the porch and yard. Clara recognized faces from town, neighboring ranches, and Samuel's ranch hands, all dressed in their finest clothes. The sense of community, of belonging, was overwhelming. By music began a simple melody played on a fiddle. By one of the ranch hands, and Clara appeared at the top of the stairs. Samuel's breath caught as he saw her. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was radiant with happiness and love. Clara descended the stairs slowly, her eyes never leaving Samuel's face. She saw the wonder there, the love, the promise of a future they would build together. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Samuel stepped forward and offered his arm. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Clara replied with a smile that made his heart skip. They walked together to where Pastor Williams waited. Their friends and family gathered around them. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with vows that spoke of love tested by adversity and proven by choice. "Do you, Samuel Whitmore, take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Samuel said, his voice strong and clear. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take Samuel to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live?" Clara looked into Samuel's eyes, seeing her future there, seeing the love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. "I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped Clara's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears of joy. She didn't even realize she was crying. When he kissed her, it was with all the love and promise of their new beginning. And the room erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed was everything Clara could have hoped for and more. There was dancing in the yard, with lanterns strung between the trees, casting a warm glow over the festivities. The food was abundant and delicious, the music lively, and the company warm and welcoming. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself pulled aside by Mrs. Patterson, the woman who had organized much of the celebration. "My dear," Mrs. Patterson said, "I hope you know how happy you've made our Samuel. He's been alone too long, that man." "He's made me happy too," Clara replied, "happier than I thought possible." "Good marriages are like that," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile. "They bring out the best in both people. You'll see you and Samuel will do great things together." Later, as the guests began to depart and the celebration wound down, Clara and Samuel found themselves alone on the porch. looking out over the ranch that was now truly their home. "Mrs. Whitmore," Samuel said, trying out her new name. "I like the sound of that," Clara replied, settling into his arms. "Any regrets?" Clara considered the question seriously. "None. Not about marrying you. Not about the path that brought us together. Not about the future we're going to build. Even though it wasn't what you planned. Especially because it wasn't what I planned," Clara said firmly. "I've learned that the best things in life are often the ones we never see coming." Samuel held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "I love you, Mrs. Whitmore. I love you too, Mr. Whitmore. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." As they stood together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their new life, Clara realized that she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not just love, but belonging. Not just a husband, but a partner. Not just a future, but a purpose. The blizzard that had nearly claimed her life had instead delivered her to exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes, Clara thought, the most beautiful destinations are reached by the most unexpected paths. 5 years later, Clara stood on the same porch where Samuel had proposed, watching her husband teach their 3-year-old son how to gentle a young colt. Little James, named for his uncle, had Samuel's dark hair and Clara's bright eyes, and he approached the world with the fearless curiosity of a child who had never known anything but love and security. "Gently, son," Samuel was saying, his large hands guiding the boy's small ones. "Animals can sense your intentions. If you're calm and respectful, they'll trust you." Clara smiled, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child grew. The morning sickness had passed, and she was in that wonderful stage of pregnancy where she felt strong and hopeful, full of dreams for the future. "Mama," James called out, his face bright with excitement. "Did you see? The horse likes me." "I saw, sweetheart," Clara called back. "You're going to be a fine horseman, just like your papa." The ranch had prospered over the past 5 years. The James Whitmore Memorial Fund had helped 23 widows and orphans start new lives, and the success stories that came back to them were a constant source of joy. Clara had also started a small school in town, teaching the children of ranchers and settlers who lived too far from the larger settlements to attend regular school. "Mrs. Whitmore," a voice called from behind her. Clara turned to see a young woman approaching, travel-worn and hesitant. She was perhaps 20, with dark hair and frightened eyes that Clara recognized immediately, the look of someone who had lost everything and was clinging to hope by a thread. "Yes. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I heard, that is, someone told me you might be able to help. I'm a widow, and I have nowhere else to go." Clara's heart clenched with sympathy and understanding. "Of course. Come inside, let's get you something to eat, and you can tell me your story." As they walked into the house, Clara caught Samuel's eye and saw his nod of approval. This was their purpose, their way of honoring James's memory and the love that had brought them together. Over tea and Maria's fresh bread, Sarah told her story. Her husband had been killed in a mining accident, leaving her with debts she couldn't pay and no family to turn to. She'd heard about the memorial fund and had traveled for 3 days to reach the ranch. "I'm not looking for charity," Sarah said quickly. "I can work. I'll do anything: cleaning, cooking, laundry. I just need a chance to start over." "Everyone deserves a chance to start over," Clara said gently. "My husband and I believe that very strongly." They spent the afternoon making arrangements. Sarah would stay with them temporarily while they helped her find work in town and a place of her own. It was a familiar process. They'd done it many times before, and each time it reinforced Clara's belief that their love story was about more than just their own happiness. That evening, after Sarah had been settled in the guest room and James had been tucked into bed, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch as they did every night, watching the stars appear in the vast Montana sky. "Another lost soul finds her way to our door," Samuel observed, his arm around Clara's shoulders. "Not lost," Clara corrected. "Just temporarily displaced. She has that look, the one that says she's stronger than she knows. Like someone else." "I remember," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Clara laughed. "Was I that obvious? You were terrified, and determined, and beautiful, and brave, all at the same time. I knew from the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. Did you know you were going to fall in love with me?" Samuel considered this. "I knew I was in trouble when you insisted on facing the Hendricks gang with me instead of hiding in the cellar. Any woman brave enough to stand beside me in a gunfight was a woman worth loving. And now I can't imagine life without you." You've given me more than I ever dreamed. Possible a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in tomorrow. Clara settled more comfortably against his side, feeling the baby kick gently inside her. Do you think James would approve of everything we've built? I think James would be proud, Samuel said without hesitation. We've honored his memory by creating something beautiful from tragedy. We've helped others find hope when they thought all was lost. We've built a love that makes the world a little brighter. I still miss him sometimes, Clara admitted. I know, and that's okay. Missing him doesn't diminish what we have, it makes it richer. We carry the best parts of him with us, and we pass them on to our children. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights come on in the bunkhouse, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Clara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The blizzard, the fear, the gradual building of trust and love, the challenges they'd faced together. Samuel, she said suddenly, do you ever wonder what would have happened if that storm hadn't come? If I'd made it to town, instead of ending up stranded? Sometimes, Samuel admitted. But then I remind myself that some things are meant to be. We were meant to find each other. Clara, the storm was just fate's way of making sure we didn't miss our chance. I used to think my story ended when James died, Clara said softly. I thought I'd had my one great love, and that was all I could expect from life. And now I know that love isn't finite. It doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies. I loved James with the passion of youth, and I love you with the wisdom of experience. Both loves are real, both are precious, and both are part of who I am. Samuel tightened his arms around her, overwhelmed by the depth of his gratitude for this woman who had transformed his life so completely. I love you, Clara Whitmore. More today than yesterday, and not as much as I will tomorrow. I love you too, Clara whispered, feeling the truth of it in every fiber of her being. As they prepared for bed that night, Clara caught sight of herself in the mirror. The frightened widow who had nearly died in a blizzard was gone, replaced by a woman who radiated confidence and contentment. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a helper of those in need. She was exactly who she was meant to be. Before she went to sleep, Clara said a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had brought her to Samuel, for the love that had healed her broken heart, for the family they'd created together, and for the future that stretched before them, bright with possibility. The young widow, who had once slept in the snow, had found her way home at last, and in the warmth of Samuel's arms, surrounded by the love they'd built together, Clara Whitmore knew that the best chapters of her story were still being written. Their love had been tested by tragedy, and proven by choice. It had been forged in hardship, and tempered by joy. It was a love that would endure whatever storms might come. A love that would light the way for others lost in the darkness. As Clara drifted off to sleep, she smiled, thinking of all the lives they'd touched, all the love they'd shared, all the hope they'd nurtured. The blizzard had been the beginning of everything, their love story, their family, their purpose, and what a beautiful beginning it had been. In the morning, there would be new challenges, new people to help, new dreams to pursue. But tonight, Clara Whitmore slept peacefully in the arms of the man who had saved her life, and shown her that love, real love, never truly ends, it only transforms, grows, and becomes something even more beautiful than before. The widow, who had slept in the snow, had found her forever home in the heart of the rancher, who had warmed her with more than just his body heat. He had warmed her soul, and in doing so, had lit a fire that would burn bright for all their days.